You're listening to the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 508. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. See ya!
Hello! Hejsan! How are you? Everything well? No?
Everything well. I finally arrived to Taipei again.
Taipei!
So, I'm coming here so often as if I was going home. But yeah, another 7 days or so here in this country, and then we are headed back. And after this, I will not be traveling for almost a month.
Woohoo! Fantastic. Great.
Looking forward to that very much. I know it sounds weird, because you like traveling, right?
Oh, yeah. I do.
I mean, you kind of like it. And most people are like that. But to me, traveling is a different kind of thing.
Of course.
I hate traveling. Probably if I traveled like once or twice a year, I would like it too. But no, it's such a pain.
Well, you don't have you as a tour guide. That's the difference. That register. Yes. What I'm trying to say is that traveling with you as a tour guide is probably much nicer than you traveling as a tour guide with me or someone else. For you. I'm just making it more complicated. Never mind.
Yes, thank you very much for that. It's absolutely not in the middle of the night that I'm doing this recording with you. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so how have you been?
I've been fine, and for people who are wondering, have been worried about my dentist appointment from last week, I can tell you it went very well. So they chipped away most of the tooth. Took an hour. And then the fun thing happened, actually, because he said he was going to implement a temporary long-term solution. And I said, what? The what? You said what?
What does that mean?
I exactly. And it's very hard to laugh when you have what feels like a forklift down your throat. But I managed to find it amusing anyway. So what he meant is that what they're putting in a plastic cap on the tooth. And if that works well, that's not a long-term solution, but it's sort of long-term. For a couple of months, I will use that. And if I still feel fine with that, they will install a proper thing after that. That's a long-term...
Made out of what?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it'll be gold. Hopefully it's been something...
I guess this just depends on the budget, right?
Yes.
So you could choose
exactly.
Materials.
Yes, that's true. I believe it will be something ceramic. Hopefully not something toxic or poisonous. But I trust my dentist. He's a good guy. I've been going with him for almost 30 years. So, yeah, he was pretty young when we started seeing each other in this... practice there, and my fear now is that he will start to talk about retiring, because then I'll have to find a new one. So he's been taking good care of me for many years, so I trust him fully.
That's good. I really wish I had that. I mean, I've never been very faithful to any of my dentists, and to be honest, I haven't had any of a good dentist. So
that may explain it.
they've all been like, okay, I've always found something about them. The last one that I found, I went in. I went to the practice. I went in, and some kind of weird smell hit me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't build your trust, to be honest, when it comes to that. Because what I would like to associate with dentists is like a clean kind of environment, that you feel like it's sterile, it's completely clean, and it's so fresh and everything. And this was not my impression at first. So I got everything done that was necessary, and then never went back.
Well, this about the smell, the most pleasant smell I've heard is the smell of freshly baked bread. But you can't expect that in a dentist's, right?
It was similar, though.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. I don't know what they're brewing in your dentist, but yeah.
Oh,
all right.
Exactly. Not my teeth, that's for sure. Speaking of building trust, I'd like to mention something here that is, we often mention them. It's the ECDC, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, and they are having a difficult time. Have you been vaccinated against the flu?
Yes, I have, yes.
Ah, good. Mm-hmm. Good for you. Mm-hmm. I didn't manage to get around to it because, when you actually travel and you're going to be exposed to stuff and you don't know what the reaction will be to the jab. So I've never had that right before traveling. So I'll be home for a month after this, so I might be able to actually get it.
I'll give you a shot for Christmas there. How about that?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And as for side effects, it was suspiciously uneventful. I couldn't feel the needle, and I had no side effects at all, which is good, right. I guess. But it makes me say, did she do anything really, or was I?
Did I actually get
just
something?
Charged me and poked me with a toothpick? I don't know.
Yeah, isotonic water. But yeah, what I wanted to mention about the ECDC is that because of the flu season, that there is massive worry about the lack of trust in the institution. So they seem to be trying to tackle that issue of the lack of trust in the health authorities. And the way they try to do that is that on their website, they are updating their key facts. And my problem with that is, even though it's very good to see that happen, that they put out the information on how vaccine monitoring occurs independently from industry interests, and emphasizing that continuous post-authorization surveillance is happening as well. The problem is that who reads the ECDC's website? It's the people who are actually interested in this and who are actually interested in the science of it. So I think it's a little bit about preaching to the choir, but it's still probably a step in the good direction that they at least make an effort now. Because what's really needed, I think, learning from what happened throughout the COVID pandemic, is that transparency should be provided for the general public. But there is another issue with this. There is a challenge about this, because even though there is rigorous science in the background, and it's, well, not that the science of vaccinations has changed, at least not significantly. They're still the best thing out there in terms of trying to avoid getting sick or getting serious illnesses. But the communication of what the science says about that is a difficult question. It's one thing to have transparency, but first of all, you need someone to listen to you, and communication of nuances, like when it comes to actual failures or actual legitimate questions about corporate influence in public health, or the phenomena that can actually be surrounding like vaccinations, and actual side effects that occasionally can occur. We would need to be able to communicate that as well, but that's a hell of a task. And good on the ECDC for putting the information out there, but I think this is a very, very small step in the right direction, and we need much more of an effort. And everyone who's in science communication should have some kind of a role in this, because apparently the ECDC is not. We should have them, actually. We should have someone on the show from the ECDC, but we don't even know whom to ask, who the kind of person who would be disseminating that kind of information is at the ECDC. And I think that is one of the problems. It's not clear to everyone who the go-to person is. And we should all know that.
My thinking is always, and you've heard me say this before, we need to start in school. People need to understand the scientific process and the scientific way of talking already in primary school. I mean, when you really, as a young person, so that you understand that if they talk about the risk versus hazard, all of that thing, that needs to be taught very early, so that, I mean, you can do it playfully if people are very young, and then it's much easier to understand what it says on these kinds of websites. But now I guess I'm dreaming, but we need to do that anyway, somehow.
Yeah, we need to put the word out there, because otherwise it's just preaching to a choir, and that doesn't lead us anywhere.
Yeah, and if you're working at the ECDC and listening to this show, get in touch so we can have you here and you can explain your thinking. That would be great.
Yeah, we'll definitely tag you on the Facebook post.
Absolutely. So
I mean the ECDC.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's good that people are listening, whether you work at the ECDC or not. We have a listener, Per from Sweden who commented on Spotify on something we talked about. We talked about Doctor Who. I think, was it last episode or the one? Yeah, it was last episode, right? And I said that we never saw Doctor Who on Swedish television. So he commented on the Spotify, which I encourage everybody to do. It's always good to hear from you. Any way you can do it. And he says that the season with Eccleston and then again with Whittaker were actually on Swedish television. Now, he didn't specify what company they were with, but I looked into a little bit and I found that SVT, the Swedish state-run TV company, also aired at least the first series of the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi, about 10 years ago. And the 9th Doctor as well. So at least the 9th Doctor, which is Christopher Eccleston, and the 12th Doctor, Capaldi, and also the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, have been available on Swedish TV. They're not anymore. You could stream it for a while.
Okay.
I guess there's a question of how long you can show them. And of course, you can see them on streaming services all over the place, on Blu-ray and DVD, if that's still a thing. But the thing is that for me, in my formative years, and I guess that dates me, so we're talking the 70s and the 80s, I don't think Doctor Who was ever on TV in Sweden. It wasn't a thing. I hadn't heard about it anyway, so I missed out. In the 90s, there was not a lot of new things produced. I might have caught them otherwise. But thank you, Per, for letting me know. It's always nice to see comments about our show online, or if you want to contact us, that's also fantastically nice. You can reach us at info@theesp.eu. Or you can become a patron if you're really a supporter. You go to patreon.com/theesp and you can sign up. And you can actually sign up for free as well. I don't think we've mentioned that, but you can do that on Patreon if you want to. And then you will get an email every time a new episode is going out. And there's not a lot of perks, but you will feel good because you're part of the community, if you will.
Yeah, but even if that is the case, I think the algorithms will take a note of that. And that is the case with other podcast sharing app platforms as well. So if you leave us a review, leave us a comment or something, the activity can help us spread the word. So we know that it's not very common that someone shares Facebook posts about a new episode of a podcast. So we're not specifically asking for that. But
why not?
Just
if you want to,
let other people around you know. If you like it, let them know. But let's see what we have for you this week. And that is quite a complete episode that usually starts with TWISH, or This Week in Skeptical History. So this week, we are going to commemorate the works of someone who quietly helped dismantle alchemy and shatter an old chemical worldview, replacing it with something far more powerful. Careful measurement and a deep suspicion of miracles. So, quite an
like
important person. Yeah, yes, definitely. And, wait for the details, because I'm pretty sure that most of our listeners have not heard this name before, because his name was Martin Heinrich Klaproth. Have you heard the name?
No, doesn't ring a bell.
And, I hadn't heard of him until I think it was in context with uranium that he was the discoverer of. So he was born on the 1st of December, which was the start of this week, and the year of his birth was 1743, and he was born in a little town called Wernigerode in what was then Prussia. So I hope I pronounced the name correctly. But as a young boy, actually, he was a boy. He was the age of 16 when he became an apprentice in a pharmacy. And he was grinding powders and preparing medicines in a small German town, then kept moving on to other small towns before eventually making his way to Berlin. And in 1771, he became an assistant and soon the actual head of a bustling city pharmacy, which was called Zum Weißen Schwan, to the White Swan. And that was a kind of a backroom pharmacy laboratory that he had there that really grew into one of the most productive chemical research hubs in Europe at the time, long before there was a University of Berlin even. So he was largely self-taught. which is fascinating as well. But his reputation for painstaking, no-nonsense analysis was so strong that when Berlin's new university was founded in 1810, he was chosen as its very first professor of chemistry, despite not having held a formal degree.
Well, there was no university before that, so how could he?
Well, there were lots of universities before that, but not the University of Berlin. But by then, he was already a member of the Prussian Academy, the Royal Society in London, the Paris Academy, and the Swedish Academy of Sciences as well.
Yeah, a lot of foreigners were elected to become part of the Swedish Academy. I
know. Or that's not the first time that we mentioned someone to be among those. But what did he actually do to earn all that recognition? Well, for starters, as I mentioned earlier, he discovered uranium. And it was fascinating. In 1789, in his private lab in Berlin, Klaproth analyzed a mysterious black mineral from Erzgebirge.
From what?
It was called pitchblende. It was a very mysterious-looking black mineral. And using gravimetric methods that he himself had actually refined, some sources even say that he came up with gravimetry, he concluded that it contained a new element. His observations and calculations didn't really match, so the only explanation, in his opinion, was that there had to be a new element. And he named it uranium, and the reason for that was that it was right after the discovery of the planet Uranus. Mm-hmm. And with that, the actual atomic age begins in a Berlin pharmacy laboratory done by a guy who didn't even hold a degree. That is mind-blowing. In the same year, working on the gemstone zircon from Sri Lanka, he isolated a new earth, something, the oxide of an element that he named zirconium. So, over his career, he discovered these two, uranium and zirconium, but he also co-discovered or independently confirmed several other elements, including cerium, titanium, tellurium, strontium, beryllium, and chromium.
Wow.
So, a large chunk of the periodic table is due to his meticulous work as a chemist. But fascinating as it is, we are a skeptical podcast. So let's look at not just what he found, but in how he refused to fool himself and let others to be fooled. What am I talking about? He lived through one of chemistry's great theoretical battles, the fall of the phlogiston theory, and the rise of Lavoisier's oxygen-based new chemistry. For decades, chemists had explained combustion, rusting, and calcination with a hypothetical substance called phlogiston. It was perpetrated by a guy named Stahl, and it explained a lot, as long as no one looked too closely at the numbers. So it's like the epicycles in how people tried for a long time to explain the movement of planets, right? So yeah. Once you started looking at that even closer, you found out that, oh no, this is not how it works. This can't explain everything. And, well, when he started carefully weighing materials, he showed that metals actually gained mass when they burned and not lost it. So something was completely off. And the explanation came from Antoine Lavoisier in Paris, who proposed a radical alternative: forget phlogiston, think in terms of oxygen and conservation of mass. But the German chemists still attached to Stahl's venerable theory, the phlogiston theory. This French innovation was not an easy sell. So, especially against the background of the Napoleonic Wars. So, well,
everything French was suspicious.
Everything coming from France. Yeah, exactly. So,
remind me when Lavoisier launched
towards
the
end of the 18th century, like 1790 something. He died in 1794. Yeah. So 1778 was the time that...
Yeah. So it was going on very much at the same time, or it was contemporary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But afterwards, obviously, at the beginning of the 19th century, it was this kind of anti-French sentiment across most of Europe. So Klaproth did something very near and dear to our skeptical hearts. He put the theory of Lavoisier to the test.
Good man.
And yeah, good man. So he read the German translation of Lavoisier's work. Then he painstakingly repeated key experiments himself, including the famous so-called pelican experiment, in which water was said to transform into earth when boiled for a long time in a glass vessel. But it turned out that some of it was actually the glass itself that appeared there. The rest of it was just dry material remaining after the boiling of the water. So for centuries, this apparent creation of earth from pure water had been taken as evidence that matter could transmute, and it fitted beautifully with the ideas of alchemy. And he tracked down the details and reran the experiment with his characteristic precision. His conclusion is worth quoting in paraphrase. The long-accepted belief that water turns into earth is unfounded. The supposed earth is simply glass, abraded from the vessel by heat and friction. Well, he was not necessarily right about every detail of it, but he did debunk the idea, in a way, earth coming out of nothing. So the miracle itself vanished when there was deeper of an examination. So from there, Klaproth became convinced that Lavoisier's framework was superior to everyone else's. So in 1792, he helped lead the Berlin Academy in officially adopting the new antiphlogistic chemistry. He emphasized that phlogiston had always been a hypothetical entity and that the new quantitative oxygen-based picture matched the experiments far better than the phlogiston hypothesis. So that's pretty good stuff. So I find it really cool how this is basically a textbook case of skeptical history. A cherished, deeply entrenched explanation basically gives way not to a clever argument or a charismatic personality, but the carefully weighed evidence and reproducible experiment.
Yeah, and I like to think about this example as well, that the phlogiston theory was not a pseudoscience. It was just wrong. It was science. It just happened to be wrong. So you can't blame them too much. They hadn't done all the correct experiments, but they at least had tried. And the people who changed their minds are not pseudoscientists.
Yes, you are quite right, but I have to mention that there were, at the time, already pseudoscientific claims circulating as well. And so he did not stop at dealing with an abstract theory. He went after those people, the quacks as well. So
there's always quacks, I guess.
Yeah. First of all, he went after alchemy, because he explicitly rejected that widely held claim that chemistry is a secret art. And he insisted in his lectures that as a scientific field, chemistry must be open, explainable, and testable. Only experiments that others can repeat, he argued, have evidential value.
What a novel idea, yeah.
Well, in the 18th century, it was not a completely novel idea, but he was probably the first who really applied it to chemistry as a general rule. And obviously, that naturally put him at odds with alchemy and miracle cures. One notorious case involved Johann Schemmler, a theology professor who claimed he had succeeded in transmuting base metals into gold.
No.
That's classic alchemy, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like the Philosopher's Stone had finally been found by this guy, and that was at a German university, no less. So that's very alarming. But Klaproth examined the case and exposed a very human mechanism in the background. Schemmler's servant had been secretly adding traces of real gold to the vessels. So the transmutation that everyone was talking about completely vanished the moment the cheating stopped. So
imagine that.
What a massive hero this guy is. Obviously, then there were a couple of miracle medicines as well. Among the fashionable remedies of the day were the Bestuchev drops, sold as a powerful cure for nervous ailments and wrapped in mystery and marketing. Like, nobody knows what it holds, but it has a miraculous effect. And he analyzed the drops and revealed that the magic elixir was nothing more than a solution of iron chloride in ether and alcohol. Well, essentially a strong iron tonic dressed up as an occult pharmaceutical product. So that was the pseudoscience of the day, actually, because they mystify the whole thing. And he did that over and over again, found some dramatic claims, vague processes, appeals to authority, and he didn't just reject them. He actually bothered to weigh, analyze, and replicate everything. And when the claims didn't stand up to scrutiny, the mystery dissolved into whatever problems he found, like contamination, misinterpretation, or ordinary chemical reactions. Another great example of that, there was a Hungarian chemist, Antal Ruprecht, quite a German name by the way, but never mind. There were lots of those in Hungary at the time. So he claimed in the 1790s to have reduced various earths, like lime and magnesia, to their metallic state in a super hot furnace, apparently demonstrating a universal method for obtaining metals from their oxides. Now, Klaproth tried to reproduce these results, but he failed, and chemical analysis showed that the supposed new metals were just bits of impure iron, probably coming from the furnace itself. He labeled the whole affair the Chemnitz illusion after Ruprecht's mining school, and warned against declaring something proved in principle when it could not be reliably repeated. Ironically, electrochemistry later did produce the corresponding metals, proving Ruprecht right about the existence of metallic bases, but Klaproth had been entirely right about the method and the need for reproducible, well-controlled experiments. So I guess they were both right in a way, and wrong as well. Anyhow, he died on the 1st of January 1817 at the age of 73. Many of the places where he worked, including his pharmacies and lab buildings, were later destroyed in war, and unlike some colleagues, he never left behind a grand theory-defining textbook or a Klaproth's law to immortalize his name. So this is why most of us have not heard of his name. But his legacy is still profound because, I thought he deserved a mention. After all, he really helped shift Central Europe from speculative phlogiston-based chemistry to a quantitative oxygen-based science, and he established standards of accuracy and reproducibility in analytical chemistry that are still recognizable today, but nothing is named after him, so that's weird. This is not how scientific nomenclature usually works, and he modeled a skeptical attitude to alchemy, transmutation claims, and miracle cures that would perfectly be at home in a modern skeptical investigation. So this week in Skeptical History, remember the son of a tailor from Wernigerode who turned a Berlin pharmacy into a powerhouse of Enlightenment science and who showed that sometimes the earth at the bottom of the flask is just ground up glass. But someone needs to bother to actually check.
Okay. So remember that, folks. Always check at the bottom of the glass. That's what I do at the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all do that. Not often enough, though. Especially, well, I'm talking about the socializing part, not my desperate need for alcohol. Okay.
Happy you clarified. Yes.
Yes, I had to. So, speaking of clarification, let's find out what's been happening in the skeptical sphere around Europe lately.
I would think most listeners are familiar with the concept of dropshipping.
Shit dropping? What?
No, dropshipping. Make sure you get it right. So this is for people who don't know, like Andras. This is when your business doesn't actually produce or manufacture anything. Instead, you just collect orders from your web shop, typically, and then you send the order to a cheap factory in Asia, most likely China, and they pack the thing that has been ordered and they send it directly to your customer. You don't ever touch the product yourself. Often it's very poor quality. It's not a really very respectable business in most people's opinion, since you don't add anything to the process, I guess, and you make money from the markup of the price. You can't say it's a scam necessarily if people get what they have ordered, but especially with the cheap and poor quality and with leaving the production in hands of shady factories. It's not considered a very responsible practice. For one thing, you take no responsibility on any ethical considerations in the manufacturing. Who knows what kind of labor these things have been produced by? I mean, if the workers, maybe they are underaged or underpaid or working 18-hour shifts or whatever. But it can be a very attractive business to get into and get rich from doing almost nothing. Or is it very profitable? Because name that scam that cannot be taken to another level. So, if you don't want to manage a dropshipping business yourself, there is another way to profit from them. You can sell courses on how to start a dropshipping company. A number of TikTok influencers are doing just that, and they are raking it in with hashtags like success and entrepreneur. These people are showing off their wealth in their videos, saying, look how rich I am. This could be you if you just buy my online course. And so if you know how to become a dropshipper, you can have the life that I'm living. In one such video, a Swedish TikTok influencer called Samuel Wennberg is sitting next to a plate of lobster. So he looks you straight into the eyes through the camera and says, quote, "Do you know what the only thing I love more than money is? It's lobster. This is my 12th lobster now, and it's only 2:00. And then there are the usual hashtags and things, and then he ends by asking viewers, how many lobsters have you eaten today? So, son of a bitch. Anyway, so he and many others like that post things every day, posing with everything from fancy cars, big mansions, and even yachts. And a lot of people sign up, I guess, because they want to live that life. And a lot of young people too. People who have grown up with the idea that doing stuff online is the cheap and easy way to become rich. That's what they see on TikTok all the time, right? And it looks like something so easy and so simple to do. You hardly even need to have any starting capital to get going, right? The customer is the one paying, and you send a fraction of that amount to China and you keep the rest. So what is the catch? What the influencers don't tell you is that they got rich from selling the courses, not from dropshipping itself. Because there's one catch to dropshipping that people don't think about very much, and that is the return of goods. If you are operating a dropshipping business in the EU, I'm sure in many countries all over the world that have the same rules, you are under law required to honor returns. For the first 2 weeks, at least in Sweden, I think it's the same in EU, I'm not quite sure. But for the first 2 weeks, it's all over the EU, Yeah, so for the first 2 weeks, the customer has the right to regret their purchase and get a full refund. And as many of these products are very low quality, a lot of customers do want to have a refund. And what then do you do? Because your profit is suddenly taken away and you are stuck with a truckload of returned unsellable crap in your garage. So there's a number of stories of young people, teenagers sometimes, still living at home, who after just a couple of months are so in debt that their parents have had to sell the family car just to pay the invoices, things like that.
It was not just because of that. It was also because the family car could not fit in the garage because of all the return bits.
Maybe
so
that's I didn't think of that. Maybe. Good point. But the ones who are selling the fictional idea of how easy it is and selling the courses of how it's done, they can sit around eating lobsters all day, right? Some of these companies are X-Society, is one of them, Don Lobu, I don't know how to pronounce that really, e-commerce, and the Vision Club Academy, also known as TVC. So these are big, so they're at least successful influencers online selling courses about how to go into dropshipping.
No, it's one thing that someone is an influencer for just the sake of it, but this is even worse than that. Because you're scamming people who dream of being scammers themselves. That is so meta. I mean, that is
brilliant, really, if you think about it, but I don't approve anyway. Yeah, so anyway, the general truth is what it always has been. If somebody promises you something that seems too good to be true, it almost always is too good to be true. Yeah. So that goes for people trying to buy stuff through drop shipping, expecting to receive a very cheap but fantastic product. They are getting screwed. And of course, also the guys who are tricked into starting a dropshipping business by the promise that they will get rich that way. So don't go for the lobster.
Don't fall for them. Yeah, and well, who cares about lobsters anyway? So I don't want to give any ideas to anyone, but
he said while doing it. Yes, okay.
I see a workaround. If you're after the number of cells instead of just making a lot of money off a few cells, you could still rely on people being too lazy to act on it. So it's like if it's something that you regretted buying, but it's so cheap that it's not worth bothering with the return.
No, it's not worth the hassle. No, I think that is why most of these products are very cheap. It's cheap plastic that doesn't work. But if you only paid €5 for it or so, then you probably won't bother. And then I guess the guy gets a little rich. I don't know how much lobster you get for €5.
Yeah, or you could apply to people's biases. If they bought something, they will probably be so ashamed that they're not going to do anything about it because they're going to be trying to shut up about it and try to...
Yeah, you don't want to advertise that you fell for a scam, of course.
Exactly. A lot of people find that difficult to admit that. Yeah. Well, there are so many different kinds of manipulations, and psychology of that is fascinating. But there is a troubling study that was released this week. Psychologists at King's College London and the Association of Clinical Psychologists UK discovered that ChatGPT 5, OpenAI's latest chatbot model, is offering dangerously inadequate and sometimes harmful advice to people experiencing mental health crises. And these findings that were conducted in partnership with The Guardian, actually, they raise serious questions about AI safety and the broader trend of people seeking psychological support from unregulated machine learning systems, which is something that you could probably stop for a moment to start with and think about whether it's a good idea. I mean, machine learning systems as psychological support, we're probably not there yet, but never mind. People do use that for that. And researchers tested ChatGPT 5 using realistic role-playing scenarios mimicking genuine mental health emergencies. Experts pose as individuals experiencing psychosis, suicidal ideation, and severe obsessive-compulsive symptoms. What they discovered should alarm all of us who are concerned with technology and vulnerable populations. Instead of recognizing red flags and directing users to professional help, ChatGPT 5 frequently, during these studies, reinforms delusional thinking. For example, in one test, a simulated loser claimed that they would, I'm not sure if it was like they would like to do that, but they could just walk through cars and run into traffic just casually. And rather than issuing urgent safety warnings, what ChatGPT did was it responded with, well, that's next level alignment with your destiny.
What?
That's language that could actually encourage self-harm. So it's really alarming. In another case, when a fictional character declared themselves the next Einstein and described an invented technology, ChatGPT engaged playfully and even offered to write Python code to support the delusion. Clinical psychologists describe this as deeply concerning because indulging hallucinations can intensify distress and dangerously delay essential professional intervention. So we must focus sharply on AI having repeatedly claimed to be addressing these issues, because they don't. A company spokesperson told The Guardian that they're working with mental health specialists around the world to improve ChatGPT's ability to recognize distress. Yet, the very existence of this study and its damning findings suggest those promises remain completely unfulfilled. So it's just talking rubbish, not doing anything about it. OpenAI itself estimates that around 0.07% of ChatGPT's 800 million weekly active users show some kind of signs of psychosis or mania. And when it comes to 800 million people, that translates to roughly 560,000 people per week.
Wow.
Potentially receiving harmful guidance. So that's not insignificant. About 1.2 million users weekly showed explicit indicators of suicidal planning, according to OpenAI itself, again. And they frame these percentages as extremely rare. Well, yes, by percentage they are, but the sheer number of people that these percentages translate into reveal a staggering population at risk. So I think this is a design flaw that can become catastrophic when applied to mental health. For example, a person who's experiencing psychosis, they cannot distinguish between an AI validating their delusions and genuine clinical assessment. Why would they be capable of doing that? A vulnerable teenager considering suicide may misinterpret ChatGPT's reassurance as informed professional judgment, when it's neither informed nor professional. So, unlike human therapists, chatbots cannot conduct risk assessments, identify behavioral warning signs, maintain confidentiality, report abuse, or provide genuine therapeutic intervention. And I admit that part of the problem, a large part of the problem, is that people are turning to them in the first place instead of seeking professional help. But we just have to accept that this is happening now. So this is why we need to focus on misinformation as well, and hallucinations of these LLMs as well, the large language models, because we cannot stop people using them, so we have to focus on how to make them more reliable instead. So
and there has to be some regulation.
Exactly. That's what the researchers are calling for. An oversight and regulation. Exactly.
Yeah.
And rightly so.
Yeah,
so it's not theoretical, the harm. It's real.
No.
And we have to focus on that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Anders, I have good news.
Good. Finally.
Well,
go ahead.
As of 1st of December 2025, so this week actually, finally there is a new law, or technically a set of new laws in Sweden, that makes it against the law to examine a woman in order to establish whether or not she is a virgin, i.e. to try to determine if she has experienced penetrative sex. So it's amazing that something that horrible would be something that people actually do, but it's also terrible that it hasn't been illegal before. So I cannot imagine a lot more invasive or humiliating that you could be exposed to, except from actual rape, I guess. But it is common. Well, no, I don't know how common it is, but it happens that people say that you, young girl, have to be examined so we know that you're a virgin before you get married, right? And obviously there's two problems, at least, with this practice. The first is that it's obviously none of your business if she has had any sexual experience at all before. That should not be your concern at all. And even if it was, I mean, maybe it wasn't voluntary. So how can you blame her for anything? And also that has anything to do with her worth as a human being. But the other thing, of course, is that you can't do it. It's not possible to do it. Regardless of what people try to tell you sometimes, there is no reliable way of determining if a woman, or a man for that reason, but we're talking about women here, if she had sex before. There is nothing physical that is changing before and after intercourse, changing in a reliable way so that a stranger can look at it. Okay, that's, that doesn't happen. Can't be done. So that means that it's totally up to the imagination of the person doing this so-called examination to determine if you are a virgin or not. Totally up to them. And they have the power of calling you a terrible slut or a good woman of moral. You're left to this person's just state of mind to say, well, whether you are a good person or not. That's terrible. And think about that, because first imagine that you actually have had some sexual experience. Good for you, I mean. But what agony you must be in before this arbitrary procedure if you believe that this will now be visible to your father and the relatives and your future husband or whatever. And on the other hand, think if you actually have really abstained from sex. Maybe because you felt that it was a moral thing to do, or maybe because you were terrified that it would show up at some point. But say that you are a quote-unquote virgin, and then this asshole guy claims that you are not. either because he doesn't understand female anatomy, or maybe because he doesn't like you and he wants to be mean, or whatever. I don't know. It's terrible either way. So that is terrible, but after years of talking about it in political circles, the rules have now changed in Sweden. The law in Sweden is as follows. It is an offense to physically examine someone's female genitalia. Yes, it actually specifies female in the law, which that's the problem, isn't it? It is an offense to do that in order to determine if the person has had intercourse. It is also an offense to, in writing or verbally, certify that another person has had intercourse or not, based on any kind of state of that person's, again, female genitalia. And also, and this is important, it is now forbidden to, through surgery or other intervention, try to modify the female genitalia, to try to make it seem as if that person has never had intercourse. First of all, because it can't be done, because there are no rules to this. And so it's a medically totally unnecessary intervention, and nobody knows exactly what it's supposed to look like anyway. Well, okay, there are people who have studied these things. I didn't mean it that way, but in terms of having or having not had intercourse. There's another thing as well. In addition, it is now also forbidden to not reveal or to not act against forced marriage or child marriages. So if you, as a private person in Sweden, get to hear about or suspect that this girl is being married off against her will, or this girl is being married off even though she is not an adult, then you have to act on this. So that's good. So it's terrible that you need to have these laws, but I'm happy that they are now finally in place, because it's been talked about for a long time. I don't know exactly what the laws says in other EU countries. I would be interested to hear about that, if this is unique to Sweden now, or maybe we are just the last one to get these rules in place.
Okay, dear listeners, you know what to do.
Yep. Info at TheESP.eu.
Okay, speaking of terrible things that people can do to other people, there is a very distressing new case report that was published in the Journal of Emergency Nursing, which details a tragedy that skeptics often warn about. That is the intersection of vulnerable patients and high-force chiropractic manipulation. So, the patient was a 48-year-old woman with a complex medical history, including systemic lupus erythematosus, which is an autoimmune disease with systemic effects, a kidney transplant, and a hypertension. Well, so quite serious stuff. Despite these significant red flags, which signal fragile blood vessels and complex physiology, she underwent chiropractic therapy. And the outcome was devastating. Following the manipulation, she suffered an acute spinal epidural hematoma, which is a massive bleed that ends up compressing her spinal cord, which resulted in acute quadriplegia, which is basically being paralyzed in all four limbs.
Yeah.
And it happened in an instant. So she was seeking relief, but instead she got paralyzed in all four limbs. Terrible stuff. And that is really something that is a fatal flaw in many alternative modalities. The lack of rigorous science-based risk stratification and assessment. Because the problem with this is that had the chiropractor bothered to actually go through the medical history of this person, it might have been avoidable. But apparently this never happened. And there are risk factors here. A science-based provider would view a patient with autoimmune disease and a transplant history as a high risk. So even if the chiropractor knew the prior history, medical history of this person, then it's even worse, because then it means that the chiropractor completely ignored all that. And high risk for vascular injury or bleeding is very serious stuff. And in evidence-based medicine, these comorbidities are contraindications that stop a dangerous procedure before it starts. So I'm not going to manipulate on a person who has a risk of vascular injury, right?
Yeah.
And fixation on subluxations, what the chiropractic model comes with, it really often supersedes physiological reality. So the actual myths that they spread about what they can do, I'm pretty sure that is the case, and the authors argue that as well. They might not even be aware of the limitations of their manipulations. So we don't know whether the practitioner ignored or just failed to understand that this patient's connective tissue and vascular health were compromised by her chronic disease and the immunosuppressive medications that she had to take. So the problem is that even though it's one case recorded here, that's not just a freak accident. It's a predictable error of a system that operates outside the guardrails of medical science. And when we advocate for science-based medicine, we aren't just being pedantic about the p-values and making sure that everything is science-based. It's not our obsession with science. It's that we are advocating for a safety culture that recognizes when not to touch a patient. This strategy should really remind every one of us that natural does not necessarily mean safe.
I don't know how natural it is to twist somebody's neck like that, but anyway, because I assume
they often claim that,
but also another tragedy is that other chiropractors will not learn from this. They will just say, oh, that was this guy. He didn't know what he was doing. It would never happen to me. So all the other chiropractors, they still believe in what they're doing, and they're going to continue to do it just the same.
Yeah. And as Simon Singh said that, for which he got in trouble, they will happily promote their bogus treatments.
Yeah. And that is legal to say, even in the UK. Because they sued
Thanks
him,
to that case.
And he won the case, and you are allowed to say that, even in the UK.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that brings us to the end of the news round, which means that we are about to find out who's been really wrong lately.
Or right.
Oh,
because this is a positive. This is Pontus on his positive side today. Well, more than usual anyway. So, but we'll start with bad things, of course. Homeopathy. Anders, what do you think about homeopathy? Bad. Homeopathy, bad.
Homeopathy, bad. Baloney, idiocy, nonsense. Yeah.
It cannot work. It does not work. It's just sugar pills. Sugar pills supposedly imbued with magical vibrations of a substance that is no longer in there. And would not, even if it was, it wouldn't cure the ailment in any case. So read up on homeopathy if you are not aware, but it does not work. So we've been around here doing this show for 10 years now, Anders. Last month it was 10 years anniversary. So we've seen state funding of homeopathy disappear from the UK and France during this time. It's still around in many other countries, but we have had high hopes for Germany, which is, of course, one of the biggest country with consumers of homeopathy in Europe. And, of course, it's the home also of Samuel Hahnemann, who invented this modality out of whole cloth way back in the early 1800s. So I guess that it's not surprising that it's still big in Germany. Yeah. When Karl Lauterbach became Minister of Health in Germany in 2021. He spoke about removing homeopathy from the state funding of healthcare, which we naively perhaps thought was going to happen in Germany just because he said so. But nothing came of it for some reason. The current health minister, Nina Warken, doesn't seem to have any special position on homeopathy, at least not what I could find, so I guess we can't count on her to do anything. But we may get there eventually anyway. Maybe it's slow progress, but maybe we're on the right path. A young pharmacist called Cedrik Schamberger is active in the Green Party of Germany, or the Green Party, it's rather the alliance called Bündnis 90 Die Grünen. That's what they're called. Yes, anyway, so this Schamberger guy, this pharmacist, he has lobbied within the Green Party or Green Alliance to change their position on homeopathy. And do you know what happened? The Green Party conference last week in Hanover, or rather Hannover. That was terrible. Anyway, it was last week. the delegates of the Green Alliance officially adopted a motion that he had written, and the motion said, quote, "The public health insurance system should not pay for therapies whose effectiveness beyond the placebo effect has not been scientifically proven," end quote. Wow, good words.
Well done.
Yeah. Moreover, they clarified that this includes homeopathy, which they now label, quote, "misleading of patients," end quote. How about that?
Wow.
So this is excellent news. And for making this happen, Cedrik Schamberger, the pharmacist who pushed this through in the Green Party, he gets this week's award for being really right. Thank you, Herr Schamberger.
Well done. And good on the politicians as well who listened.
Yeah.
And they were willing to consider the actual evidence or the lack thereof. So yeah, great. Pretty good stuff. Thank you very much for that, Pontus.
Changing your mind is a virtue, people. If you have been wrong.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, let's see if we can back that up with some kind of a quote as well to finish on. Today's quote comes from French physiologist Claude Bernard, and it was published in his magnum opus, An Introduction to the Study of Experimental Medicine, from 1865. Mm-hmm. And the quote is, "Even mistaken hypotheses and theories are of use in leading to discoveries. This remark is true in all the sciences. The alchemists founded chemistry by pursuing chimerical problems and theories which are false. In physical science, which is more advanced than biology, we might still cite men of science who made great discoveries by relying on false theories. It seems, indeed, a necessary weakness of our mind to be able to reach truth only across a multitude of errors and obstacles."
Yes, it's good to fail sometimes if you learn from it. Again.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. You have to learn from it, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's not going to be of use.
That is true. Change your mind when the evidence goes against your hypothesis.
Yeah, please do. All right, but that brings us to the end of this week's episode, so I'd like to thank you very much, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so, and until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Islat. This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social, like us on Facebook, or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others. I don't know how you can believe. Okay, recording in progress. You know what? I'm recording with 3 different devices now. Okay. I'm still testing stuff.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Why not?
I went into the what is it called? It's not an operating room. What is it? It's I
don't know.
What is the room where they do the practice?
Operating theater.
A theater? Oh, okay, could be. Never mind. You could apply to their capability of
finishing a sentence.
No, I don't have that.
They clarified that Anders,
tell me.
say ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. GPT.
No. You've said it the
ChatGPT.
wrong way all around. You've said
Really?
it 3-4 times, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Okay. ChatGPT.
But that'll have to do.
Okay. Okay.